Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, Iran seemingly drifting further and further from a negotiated nuclear deal. Meanwhile, a brand new coronavirus czar is appointed in Israel just in time for Israel's shifting in policy. And finally, lazy puppy owners beware. You'd better start picking up after your pets because your days of anonymity are numbered. A major breakdown in Vienna, ongoing nuclear talks between world powers and the Ayatollah regime in Iran coming to a standstill as Tehran reportedly freezes negotiations until mid-August at the earliest, this being just after the swearing in of Iranian President-elect Raisi. Renewed nuclear negotiations between the P5+1 world powers and the Ayatollahs in Tehran seemingly stuck since June 20, and there's no sign that they'll resume anytime soon. Iranian authorities now saying that they have no intentions of restarting talks until at least mid-August, after Iranian President-elect Ebrahim Raisi begins his administration. Officials apparently asking for time to deal with the transition of office. Though the new Iranian administration in itself posing fresh problems, as Raisi, aka the hangman of Tehran, is already garnering sharp opposition worldwide, particularly by Iranian expats who recently took to the streets around the world in protest.
We want that the federal government of Germany initiate investigations against the regime, sanctions against the regime, and maximum pressure against the Iranian regime. Ali Khamenei is the godfather of terrorism, and Ibrahim Raisi is a mass murderer.
Additionally, Raisi is seen as a hardline proponent of the Iranian nuclear program, and Tehran, meantime, increasing its pro-nuclear rhetoric, a tried-and-true negotiating tactic as long as Iran claims it's for peaceful pursuits.
صنعت هسته‌ای ما با قدرت باقی موند و تو این ماهای اخیر بیشتر ظاهر شد و نشون داد که سازمان انرژی اتمی ما با چه توانمندی و قدرتش میتونه 20% تولید کنه، میتونه 60% تولید کنه. حتی اگر یه روزی نیاز داشته باشیم ما برای راکتوری 90% هم باشه ما میتونیم، ما مشکل نداریم، هر چه برای صلح‌آمیز در مسیر صلح‌آمیز هر کاری رو ما میتونیم انجام بدیم.
Regardless, Western powers are opting to continue with nuclear negotiations, arguing that they're the best path forwards. And this even as Iran at the same time violating negotiating powers' sovereignty, like how when alleged Iranian intelligence operatives in New York attempted to kidnap Iranian-American journalist and critic Masih Alinejad. At least 4 Iranian nationals now indicted in the plot.
We have never assessed Iran to be a good actor in the world, not just by this plot to kidnap a person who's residing in the U.S., but their activities in the region, which we have had great concern about, and the president has taken retaliatory actions for. But at the same time, we still see it in U.S. interest and in our national interest to engage in ongoing discussions so that we can have greater visibility into Iran's path to acquiring a nuclear weapon. So we will continue to pursue those talks, pursue the diplomatic path forward, which we think is in our interests and continues to be constructive.
That said, other, more aggressive options are seemingly still on the table. U.S. President Biden said to be inviting Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett to Washington in August, and with Iran and the nuclear deal reportedly topping the agenda. Israel has consistently railed against negotiations with Iran and, by extension, the JCPOA nuclear deal, arguing that Iran's existential threat against Israel and the region must not be underestimated. Finally, in that same vein, Israeli security establishments are requesting a massive budget increase of several billion shekels per year, the idea being to properly prepare for a potential attack against Iran's nuclear program. In other news, just in time for the shift in tactics to a strategy of soft suppression, Israel appointing a new coronavirus czar. ILTV's Chana Rifkin reporting.
The game of COVID musical chairs continuing. Health Minister Nitzan Horowitz officially nominating Professor Salman Zarqa to the position of coronavirus czar. Zarqa, who served as the director of Tzfat's Medical Center for the last 7 years, replacing Professor Nachman Ash, who left the post last month to become Health Ministry Director General. In any case, Zarqa's challenges already mounting. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett still trying to raise the public's level of cooperation against coronavirus, arguing that if the people get on board, COVID could be beaten in Israel within just 5 weeks' time.
יש לנו שתי אפשרויות פה. אפשרות אחת זה להמשיך להיות אדישים, להגיד זה בעיה של הממשלה, ואז אנחנו נזנק ונגיע בסוף לסגר. אפשרות אחרת זה היום הציבור כולו. כל אחד ייקח אחריות, ואז אנחנו יכולים תוך 5 שבועות להוריד את כל העסק הזה, לנצח. כשאני אומר אנחנו, זה הממשלה והציבור ביחד. אבל חשוב לי שתדעו, זה תלוי רק בנו.
As for what's being requested of the public, Bennett outlining 3 actions. 1, getting vaxxed.
יש עדיין 1.5 מיליון ישראלים שעוד לא יצאו להתחסן. יש רצף מלאי, תצאו להתחסן.
2, maintaining social distancing and avoiding large-scale events.
זה אומר, מפסיקים ללחוץ ידיים, אפשר ככה, בואי ידי רגע, תגידי לי שלום. בבקשה, ככה עושים את זה. אפשר גם מרפק, נראה. מפסיקים להתחבק ולהתנשק חוץ מבמשפחה, אבל פשוט מפסיקים. ובעיקר מודעות גבוהה לאירועים המוניים.
And 3, wearing masks. Bennett explaining that police will now level harsh penalties against all violations.
זה עובד, מדעית, זה עובד. עכשיו, אני לא מבקש מכם, זאת חובה על פי החוק.
Then finally, authorities recommending that Israelis avoid all flights abroad, saying it's not worth it, with tickets likely to be canceled amid COVID spread abroad. Infections in Israel, for one, still rising at a rate of 1.38%.
Now on to another matter with more international significance. You've likely noticed that there's been a sharp spike in anti-Semitic rhetoric and incidents lately, coming from the streets, the media, and even government officials. And the line between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism is becoming a particularly polarizing and increasingly political issue. Jews in the diaspora, meantime, caught in the middle and largely ignored. So what to do? Well, activist and senior fellow at the Tel Aviv Institute, Chen Mazig, joins us with his insights. Chen, it's great to have you with us. Now, in what ways has anti-Semitism been politicized, and how does one go about depoliticizing anti-Semitism?
I think anti-Semitism has always been an issue that is, sometimes people describe it as a political football. You see that the right wing is using it to attack the left wing, and the left wing is using it to attack the right wing. And both parties have always an excuse to why they're not anti-Semitic, to why what they are saying is just anti-Zionism, or why their anti-Semitism cannot be, can be excused because they are actually pro-Israel. I think it's a serious problem. And what we need to do, all of us, I think, together, the Jews in the diaspora and people that care about this issue, is to depoliticize Zionism, depoliticize anti-Semitism, that is, to make sure that every time people engage in anti-Semitism, no matter if they're coming from the left or the right, we call it out, and we don't let anyone free pass on using anti-Semitic rhetoric, using anti-Semitic tropes, because I think for far too long we have allowed it to happen, and we've reached a point that we really need to make a stop to it.
All right, now, you've already alluded to this a little bit in your first response, Chen, but this is a hot-button issue, whereas some believe anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism should be synonymous, while others argue that they are separate. What are the pros and the cons to each argument, and what's your take?
I think that, in theory, there's a room for discussion about how people can oppose the existence of any state, of any nation state. Unfortunately, often we are hearing people that are anti-Zionist advocating for another ethno-state, for a Palestine, which is going to be an ethno-state, while they are saying that they're against every existence of every ethno-state, which is bizarre. There is, in theory, as I said, a way to be anti-Zionist and to be anti-every country, but it's not the case with what we're seeing online and what we're seeing in the media and even in Congress. I just had a tweeting exchange with Representative Beresheet the other day, where she was saying that she actually cares about my rights as an Israeli but she also cares about Palestinian rights. And I challenged her and I said, if you do care about my rights, why do you continue to dehumanize me? She didn't have an answer to it. And I think that's really what we're seeing from a lot of the anti-Zionist advocates and the people that are supporting boycotting Israel or supporting attacking Israel online. That once you bring it up to them and saying, okay, do you really, are you advocating for a political ideology that is fair? Do you promote peace? They can't answer because anti-Zionism is often, as we know, is going to lead to one outcome, which is having over 6 million Jews in Israel stateless and calling for the death of millions of us.
So let's maybe leave the people watching with with a couple tips to become more active in this. Do you have maybe some tips that you could give people of how they should or can be engaging with their peers?
Absolutely. I mentioned it before. I think that we need to be a part of the conversation about racial equality and social justice, not only from the left. I mean, no matter where you stand, if you're on the right or on the left, anti-Semitism is a cause that everyone should fight. It doesn't matter where they stand. And that's why it's so important for me to depoliticize anti-Semitism. And that's why everyone can do that. You have peers, you have friends that are belong to different communities that some of them are part of a marginalized community, have a conversation with them, listen to them. I find that the more we listen to others, the more they want to listen to you and the more they want to support you. And once the Jewish community and Jewish people will show themselves as allies to those communities, and when we are, I don't want my words to be interpreted as if we aren't, but we need to do more of this and listen to others, but then also bring in the similarity of our experience. I had this conversation with a Black friend of mine in the UK that she told me that she finds that Black people have been degraded into subhuman, and she finds that the Jewish community or Jewish people have been portrayed as superhuman, and both the Black community and the Jewish community have been dehumanized. So I think that's what we need to fight. We need to fight for humanization and to fight dehumanization, and that's what you can do by just speaking to your friends and allies on your Jewish identity and listening to them.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best takeaway. Above all else, be a human, be a good human. Chen Mazik, thank you so much for being with us.
Amen.
Now, speaking of keeping clean, we return to Tel Aviv, where a newly approved municipal law could soon hit the city's pet owners with hefty fines. That is, of course, unless owners pick up after their pups. Over 40,000 households in Tel Aviv alone have a dog. That's one canine for every 11 residents, the highest puppy-to-person ratio on Earth. So lazy owners leaving their dogs scat unscooped, becoming an increasingly annoying issue. City Hall estimating that over 500 kilograms, or just over half a metric ton, of waste is cleaned from the public spaces every month. So to deal with the issue then, Israel's White City passing a unique measure on Monday, ordering the creation of a doggy DNA database, and it'll be comprised of saliva, the spit samples set to be collected by veterinarians when the animals are brought in for annual rabies vaccines. Then, armed with this listing, the city will begin testing any leftovers on the street against the DNA in the database. And if a match is discovered, the owner will be punitively fined for both the cost of the DNA test and for leaving the droppings behind in the first place. Now, in February 2019, the first Israeli robotic lunar lander and lunar probe, Beresheet, jetted off on Israel's first non-governmental mission to land on the moon. And in April 2019, it crashed and burned during its landing attempt. But while tragic, in science, these kinds of setbacks are expected. So Space IL and Israel Aerospace Industries have just continued towards the goal. Now fast forward to early 2021, and Beresheet 2 was announced. Then fast forwards again to today, and we have some more very exciting updates on the project. Joining me in the studio with details is aerospace correspondent at C-Tech by Kalkalist, Yafit Ovadia. Yafit, it's such a pleasure to have you back with us.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, so what can you tell us about the Beresheet 2, about the new mission, the latest developments, plans, agreements, etc.?
Okay, well, I can say that Beresheet 2 is definitely moving forward. It's slated to launch in 2024, and this week on Sunday, Space IL just announced that it has completed raising $70 million of the required $100 million
wow.
To start construction on the spacecraft, which is very exciting, and it had several donors, including several foundations, the Kahn Foundation for Morris Kahn, the Drahi Foundation, and the Moshal Foundation, as well as Entree Capital and a few other private investors.
Are there like other nations that are involved?
So for that, I can say that I spoke with former Science Minister Yizhar Shai last December, and he related to me that Israel is in talks with between 6 to 7 nations about other countries who would like to join Israel on this exciting mission. And one of them is definitely, seems like it will be the United Arab Emirates, which is very exciting. This week, Morris Kahn and some co-founders of Space IL traveled to Dubai to speak with some senior officials over there.
Oh, wow. All right. So a lot of international interest, I think, on this experiment. So what are some of the details maybe of this experiment, the similarities and differences between Beresheet 2 and the first lander, maybe even to its propulsion system, ideally?
Well, I can say that Beresheet 2 will be different from Beresheet 1. It's not merely another lunar landing. Israel is trying to do what no other country has done before and not just send another lunar craft, but land 2 separate lunar landers and have an orbiter which will continue to orbit the moon for between 3 to 5 years.
Wow. All right. Yeah. So that's more ambitious, really, than the first one.
So far, Space IL and their plans that they have released and what they have told to the media, they plan on sending both of the lunar landers. One of them they plan to land on the far side of the moon, which is a feat that only China has accomplished, while the other they plan on landing on the side of the moon that we can see from Earth.
And again, I think what's really shocking about this is a private-run mission, really.
It's a
this
private
is not a
venture.
government. Wow. All right. So I guess my final question is: we mentioned that there are some differences, more ambition, I would say, in the Beresheet 2, but are the experiments that were included in the landers, are they changed, from the Beresheet 1 having crashed into the surface, or is it really just let's reset?
Well, allow me to add that it's going to be very similar to Beresheet 1 in the fact that the landing sequence is going to be very same. Like the orbital flight pattern, it's going to rotate the Earth, rely on energy from solar panels and less fuel, be lightweight, which is all very similar to the first. But after the crash of Beresheet 1, at Space IL, they actually held a task force to analyze all the problems that went wrong so that they would not happen again. And that's why they proposed this mission with 2 separate landers to increase the possibility of actually landing.
All right, well,
Yeah.
I'll be crossing my fingers again. I watched the crash live last year, so hopefully we won't have another repeat.
And I can add that there will be no experiments. It's not like the second Israeli astronaut, but on the other hand, there will be a kind of like a disk where it will include, like this first Beresheet, where it includes a bunch of patriotic data, Israeli Declaration of Independence, the Bible.
Okay, in case some extraterrestrial life comes upon
Who knows?
We can hope, and maybe also this time we don't dump thousands of tardigrades on the surface of the moon. Look it up, it's a thing. Yafit Ovadia, thank you so much.
Thank you.
In other news, did you know that cannabis is considered a superfood? Well, it is, and that's why the next revolution in the cannabis industry is largely expected to be in bringing cannabis ingredients to the food and beverage market. The problem is that ingredients meant for consumption have to go through a rigorous series of tests. And even then, different nations will have different standards that have to be met. So there's almost never a one-size-fits-all solution. The good news is that Israeli-based Cannabis has developed a way to solve all of your cannabis food needs. And here to tell us more is CEO and founder of Cannabis, Ofer Segal. Ofer, it's a pleasure to have you here with us. Thank you so much. Now, tell us a little bit about Cannabis.
First of all, thank you for having me on the show. So, as you mentioned, the food and beverage industry is looking at cannabis as the next big game changer. And although it might seem that it's easy to incorporate cannabis into food, just spread it on, it's not. There are 2 major challenges. One would be the technological challenges, how to incorporate, and the second is, as you mentioned, the regulations and the standards of a very mature food industry. So at Cannabis, we recognized where the market is heading. We lived up to both challenges, and we are now producing food ingredients, cannabis food ingredients that are designated for the food industry.
All right, so how does this technology work exactly? How do you go about doing what Connecticut does?
Okay, so our ingredients are designated and designed to work specific for the food and beverage industry. That's the technology, that's what we are doing. And understanding our clients, which are food and beverage companies, we are focusing on consistency, on controlled release, on accurate dosing, and of course, harnessing the entourage effect.
All right, so that's actually brings me to my next question, because one of the major challenges in any cannabis technology is actually harnessing, as you mentioned, the entourage effect, which is, of course, how all of the many active components in cannabis actually have a synergistic effect, where they improve one another's efficacy, as opposed to when you pull one of these chemicals out, their efficacy drops dramatically. So how does your technology preserve this effect?
So not only that we're talking about how how the cannabis compounds are working with each other, we have also incorporated other natural compounds and getting from that a much larger effect, an effect that can can help us not only in the function but also in other issues of the ingredient. Some of them we're now patenting.
All right, so first of all, where would you find some of these projects and what stage of development is your company in right now?
First of all, we've finished R&D. We are now manufacturing. We get a lot of interest from different food and beverage companies that want to incorporate this ingredient in their food and beverages, and they understand that we are complying with their needs. Where will you find us? Anywhere. In any known brand, in any chocolate, and in any product that you like, you will find us there.
Now, something I read about you and Connecticut is that you describe this as a functional food. Can you tell me a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, well, the world is going to functional foods. I mean, you put curcumin in drinks. You're using the food not only for nutrition, you're using it to get other functions. And basically, if you're using plants and you're using, why not cannabis? It's the major superfood.
Wow, yeah, well, I think all the research pretty much, or a lot of it actually, at least, definitely promotes that view. So what's next for Connecticut then?
Well, we saw where the market is heading. We understand the big boom ahead. We got the tech, we got the know-how, and we got the ability. So next for us is to meet the market. And for that, we are now fundraising, and we're doing that through the PeopleBiz platform. And I invite everyone to invest and join us in the cannabis food tech revolution.
All right. Well, we'll put the address of where you can find Connecticut on PeopleBiz if you want to get involved in Connecticut's future development. Ofer, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, for our final piece before we go, it's time to learn some Hebrew with our friends at Ulpan Or.
כן, אני מדבר עברית.
יופי. אתה יודע איפה יש כספומט?
בטח, ישר וימינה.
תודה. ואתה יודע איפה יש קפה ארומה?
אין פה קפה ארומה. אבל יש פה קפה הלל. יש שם קפה מעולה.
יופי. איפה קפה הלל?
שמאלה, ישר ושמאלה.
תודה. אני באמת צריכה קפה עכשיו.
בבקשה.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast with Chana Rifkin.
So it's going to be hot this weekend, surprise. Lows over the next 3 days expected to be very warm, ranging from 19 to 28 degrees Celsius, and temperature highs ranging from 29 to 41 degrees Celsius. Meteorologists predicting clear skies throughout the country from Thursday to Saturday. Have a Shabbat Shalom, and now back to the studio with Aaron.
All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.26 shekels to the American dollar and 2.61 shekels to the Canadian dollar. Finally, for the latest updates and news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as to our newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Aaron Porras. Be well, Have a wonderful weekend, and thank you so much for watching.